Michael. Welcome to the show for the sixth and final edition of your Michael McQuade Masterclass.
Sam, thank you. Yes, good to be back.
Yeah, absolute pleasure to have you again. And now we're going to talk about how to get started in property development. So, what attracted you to property development and how did you take that initial step?
Well, I guess for those that haven't maybe listened to some of the other podcasts yet, I'm a chartered surveyor by background, and I had a job in the West End in London. I used to work when I was in university, studying to be a building surveyor. I used to work on building sites in the summers and Easter holidays, college holidays, and stuff like that. So I guess I was always into construction. I was always around building sites. That's kind of where I liked to be, doing manual type things. And so when I got my job as a surveyor in the corporate world, I think it was always kind of a natural thing for me to do. Then I guess myself and my now wife, girlfriend at the time, we also aspired to buying our first flat when we moved to London. This is back in 2002, so a long time ago now. And I guess we always knew that we would be buying something that needed work. And it seemed like a natural progression for me then to move and use the knowledge that I had as a surveyor from my professional training. The stuff that I did in central London a lot of the time involved me being involved in, I guess, repurposing of buildings, some new developments, so fairly big projects in central London. So I was always working, I guess, either advising landowners, as in building owners, landed estate owners in central London, what to do with their buildings, helping people advise them on that. So I was always kind of in that space of alterations, refurbishments, new builds. So it was kind of natural for me then to want to use that knowledge for myself, which kind of then led me when we bought our first property, which we'll talk about in a bit, I'm sure. That was kind of our first development. And then it just kind of grew from there into what we do now.
Yeah, so what was your first development then?
The very first one in 2003 was the very first one we bought. Myself and my wife, bought a studio flat in Acton, West London. And that was a studio flat that had planning permission it was a ground floor Victorian conversion flat. It was a studio. It had planning to do a kitchen extension on the rear. And we bought it with a view that we'd go back in for planning and do a much bigger extension on the rear, because although it was a studio flat on the ground floor, it had the whole of the rear garden. The rear garden wasn't shared by any of the upper flats. So long story short, we went in for planning and we basically got planning for a really big extension on the back in the garden and converted a studio flat into a 2 double bedroom flat.
Yeah, so that would have increased the value tremendously, I'd imagine. Is that what it did?
Yes, a lot. So to talk about, I guess, the numbers, because this is way back, even maybe before some people who are listening to this, might have been doing development. So we bought the flat for, I think it was 133,000. And when we sold it then 3 years later, 3.5 years later, we sold it at 270,000, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so it's doubled in value.
More or less, yes, yes. Yes, so that was that. So that was a good project for us. That was that we lived there. That was where we lived. And I guess that was my first taste of property development. And that was done while I was still in my corporate job at the time. So I was coming home in the evenings. Because I was fairly practically minded and handed. I was coming home in the evenings, getting stuck in, getting the old clothes on, getting out the back, putting down hardcore, whacking down hardcore, ready for screeds, all this stuff, because we were doing it ourselves to save money, because we didn't have a lot of money to spend on trades or anything at the time, because we were, I guess, new to the UK and new in our jobs.
Yeah, and what you say about doing a lot of the work yourself, I hear so often now that people say, get people to do it, you can project manage or go out and find the next deal. But I think for the first few, it's very good to be hands-on, even though you'll make loads of mistakes and it'll cost you a small fortune in your mistakes. But I think it gives you a good grounding and you know what the trades you will later employ have to do. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I guess it depends. I mean, so I would say that some people, for us at the time, and just to put it into context in my example, we didn't have the money to spend on trades. I knew that trades would get this job done far quicker, and it would be done, and it would be done. It would just be done quicker. It would be done quicker than I could do it, because I had limited time to spend on it, and I was taking longer to do the bits that I was doing because I wasn't as skilled or as quick as somebody who's doing it every single day. So I think there's a difference in doing work. If you can afford to pay somebody else to do it, I think you should do that, and you should save your time for doing things that you're skilled at, which is finding the next deal or something else, whatever that is. It could be your day job. But if you don't have enough money to pay other people to do it, I think then don't not get started because you have to do some of the work for yourself. As long as you know that that's just a stepping stone and that you're going to do the work, which we did at the time. We knew this wouldn't be how we would be conducting all of our projects, but at the same time, there was no other choice at the time. Well, there was a choice. There was a choice where we could have not done it at all, but then we wouldn't have been able to get started. So I think the difference is, if you haven't got that luxury of having the money to pay people to do everything for you, then don't be afraid to get stuck in and get doing it, even though you know it's going to take longer, even though you know you're going to make the mistakes. But it's the only way that you're going to get your first deal done, and done at a pace that at which you can afford it. Maybe you're earning money while you have your day job to pay for the next trade that you'll get in 3 months' time, when ordinarily you could have had them in 2 weeks' time had you had enough money. And you're doing all the stuff in between. That's a way of you kind of getting started and getting that first pot of money built up a bit further, that ordinarily it's not going to drop out of the sky into your hands.
Oh, it'd be bloody nice if it did. What advice would you give to somebody with limited capital? How could they get started in property development?
Well, I mean, look, it's way easier now. It's way easier now, presently, to get started in development than I guess it was when I started in 2003, because I guess with social media and the ease at which people can talk about stuff on social media now, and uh, I guess how that has all taken off, and particularly, I guess, in the property world, it's much easier now to find people that have money that want to invest in projects. And I guess it has opened up that whole world of private investors, business owners that have money. So I think just because you don't have money to get started yourself doesn't mean that you might not have some contacts or be able to get some contacts for some money. And that probably isn't going to be necessarily from a bank, because you maybe have no track record where you aren't going to get the funding all that easily. Maybe you can get some funding, but you're short the deposit. You can only afford a small proportion of the deposit to buy the site or the building. Find some private investors then, and some private investors where, I guess you can give them a good return on their money, and get started that way. So build it up by bringing smaller pieces of money into the equation to fund the bit that you don't have yourself. And yes, you'll have to give away more money in interest. Yes, you'll have to give away maybe some of your profit, but again, back to kind of doing the work when you have nobody else, you can't afford to pay somebody else to do it. That's your method of getting started. That's your method of doing the first one or two to build up your pot of capital, so that at some point then you don't need to be asking the private investors for money. You don't need to be asking so many private investors for money. And then you get to the point where you have enough money to fund deals yourself with banks and whatever else. So I guess that's something to be thinking about doing, rather than sitting waiting to find that money from somewhere, because it's going to take you a long time to earn it yourself.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point, to go out and find some investors. And if somebody was to do that, you've mentioned social media, how else could somebody go and do it?
Well, I guess going to property networking events as well. I guess some are better than others for finding investors. I guess you'll typically find people now that go to property networking events that maybe they're doing some of their own projects as well, and sometimes they have some spare cash and they want to diversify what they're doing or spread their risks. So they'll happily sort of, do their own project, but they'll have some money left over, and then they'll consider, with the right sort of person looking for the money, they would consider then giving that to you as a way to use that money. Perhaps it's not enough for them to buy their next project with. They'll lend that out then to you. So you can find people by going there, speaking to business owners. I guess just speaking to anybody and telling everybody what you're doing. Even if it is somebody who is just a family connection or a family friend, you're talking about what you're doing. You're talking about the fact that you're looking to raise private investment. You'll always be surprised at where people say, "Oh, I know X and X, or so and so, and they lend money to people. You should have a chat to them."
Yeah, it's about building that network, and such a great point on letting everybody know about what you do and what you want to do, because if you don't tell anybody, nobody's going to know.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about it, the chances are that, because what you don't know is, because people are not necessarily out there shouting about, oh, I'm an investor. I've got money sitting in the bank. I'd like to spend it, please. Do you know anybody? People don't generally go around saying those things. But by you talking about, and by you saying that you look for private investment, that can quite often then instigate a conversation with somebody who maybe has been thinking about, or maybe has been doing it a lot, but they've been doing it under the radar. They don't really talk about it all that much. They just do it sort of in a very low key way with people that are recommended to them. So if you're not talking about what you're doing and talking about the fact that you take on private investment, then you'll never come across those opportunities to find those people. So yes, it's something you need to be talking about a lot, and just getting into conversations with people you're talking to.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what knowledge or skills do you need to learn quickly when starting out?
Well, I guess a big one is financial. You need to improve your financial literacy in terms of, I guess, how you appraise projects, how you analyze costs, how you analyze the time cost of money as well, which is very important, which a lot of people don't really place enough emphasis on, or don't take into account or factor in enough when they're considering projects. Because if you don't factor in the time cost of money, then, for example, people will talk about, if you're not getting a 20 or 30% return on a project, there's no point doing it. Uh, that's fine, but that project might take you 2 years to do. So some people will just automatically turn their nose up at a 10% return. Well, a 10% return is not the same as a 20 or 30% return over 2 years if the 10% return is achievable within 6 months. Then a 10% return looks like a very good return, particularly if it's on a project that isn't really that risky. So I think to improve your financial literacy, your understanding of how numbers work, your understanding of how to analyze finance and how to analyze returns, will just mean then that you're not just in this camp of, oh, it doesn't meet this target, so therefore I'm not looking at it. There are a whole load of factors that should be taken into account when you're assessing the return on a project, the number itself.
Yeah, that's a great point, to know how numbers work. And people say, but I'm not good at maths, I hate maths. It's not really maths. You can get a spreadsheet to do it. And as long as you understand the numbers, I think you can make yourself a success in property. And it's rather numbers driven. Emotion shouldn't come into it. So getting the numbers right is absolutely spot on. That's a really great point.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as an example for me now, 22 years later in my development career, the sorts of projects I'm involved in now are way bigger than, I guess, that first studio flat, and more complex and more risk involved, more money involved as well to buy. But all the decisions then at some point, so for me now, for probably the last 10 years of my development career, decisions have been largely made purely only on investment metrics. So it doesn't really matter much about what it is. I try not to build things out as well if I can anymore. And I'll always look at numbers. So you get more sophisticated then. The bigger the projects you do, the more learning you have from doing, and the more experience you have, you get more sophisticated in sort of how you analyze returns as well. So for example, in my early years of development, but again, I guess we had to do this. We generally built everything out ourselves. So for the first 10 years of my 22 years career, we built everything out. So moving from that studio flat, we were building small blocks of apartments, mixed use schemes, and multi-use buildings, that kind of stuff. And we tended to build them out ourselves because then we had more money in the bank at the end. But I knew I was always moving towards, I guess, making smarter returns. So for example, for the last 10 years then, or 11, 12 years now, it's been, how do we buy buildings that need asset management? How do we add value and then sell it on to somebody else then to do the building out? So I've kind of become the person who we would have been buying off in our early years, but that's because we didn't have the money then to buy sites without planning. We didn't have the money to buy sites unconditionally, so we had to buy with the risk-free element of pounds that I'll have now are way less than the hours I'll spend to make the bigger number of pounds over the next 2 years. So actually, hour for hour, I'm making more money by selling this on to somebody else right now. And I think you want to get into that way of thinking about things. Just because you have something, just because you've got planning, just because you've got planning to change the use of it, doesn't mean you have to do it, doesn't mean you have to do all of it. You should look at, do I carve this up? Do I split off the title? Do I do various things like that in order to de-risk it and to, I guess, drive your returns even more?
Yeah, great point. And I just want to reiterate the words that you said, de-risk it. The absolute diamond with property development is, I think, de-risking. Can you just explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, so de-risking, I guess, for me, what I've learned over the years is that, if you're on a bill, some of our bills we'd have been on site for, like, in the construction phase for a year and a half on our projects that we were building out, and then you have a sales cycle after that, and the sales cycle after that could be 6 months before you've got your final bit of money in the bank. So a lot can happen in that. A lot can happen in that build phase. A lot can happen in the sales phase. So 2 years is a long time for a project. 1 year is a long time for a project. For things to happen in the economy or the wider world stage, I guess, where your risk of your sales values can drop, your construction costs can go up. So there's a whole load of things that happen in the meantime, in between the time periods, that are outside of your control largely. So I guess you'll be de-risking then by, let's say, selling stuff up front off plan, although you're accepting a lower price for it to secure the sale. Or you're de-risking things by, let's say, how do I sell off parts of what I've got planning for in order to get some money back in now? So it's just looking at how do I get, basically start to get this money back in sooner?
Yeah, great point, great point. So, what were the biggest surprises or challenges that you faced on your very first project?
Well, I guess because I was a surveyor by background, there wasn't really too many surprises from me, because I kind of knew what we were getting into, and I knew what the work would have involved and did involve. I suppose it's just more the realization of how long things take when you're trying to do them for yourself. And I guess the frustration that comes with that, when you know that, okay, this could be a 3 month job, but it's taking me 9 months because I'm doing it largely myself. So I think it's not so much mistakes or challenges, but more, I guess, more solidified for me in that time, I guess, the value of doing things that you're good at doing and giving things to other people that they're good at doing. Because, if you're anywhere handy, you could probably take on a whole refurbishment yourself. Having said that, there are people who've trained to be carpenters. There are people who are skilled tradespeople who can do tiling and will do a far better job than you and do it far quicker than you. So I think, don't fall into the trap of, just because you can save some money by doing some stuff yourself, if you can afford to pay other people to do it, pay them to do it, because it'll be done quicker and better, and you'll be able to move on to the next project sooner, which is also de-risking.
Yeah, and I'd love you to tell that to my mate. He's doing an extension himself, and it must be 18 months now, and a builder would have had it done in about 3.
Yes.
But he thinks he's saving money, and fair play to him. He's very particular, and it's great what he's doing because he's learning. He's got no time scale to do it. I think that's part of it. But I told him 2 years ago, just let a contractor handle it, and you'll be living in your new kitchen, and you'll love it. But nah,
Yeah.
he wanted to do it all himself.
Yeah. And I think, that's fair enough if it's not a business, and that's fair enough if you aren't looking to make your money out of doing that kind of stuff. If it's just something that he's doing, or something that somebody else who's watching, wants to do, and it's their own personal project, and they aren't too concerned about whether it's this year or next year that they start to, cook a nice meal in the new kitchen. But that's the wrong thing to be doing if you're intending on making property your business, because you can't run a business by you doing everything yourself. You have to outsource, you have to employ people to do things, and to make it a business, you have to be turning over work all of the time, turning over projects all of the time, regularly. And you can only do that by putting people in the right positions at the right times. And also, back to the de-risking point, the quicker you have a job finished, not that you're doing it in a shoddy way, but the sooner that you can bring a project to completion and have it on the market for sale, and the sooner you accept an offer price in that building, you're de-risking, I guess, the unknowns for you all the time by having that approach. If you have a more lackadaisical approach and you think, oh, well, I can do the painting myself, so I'll do it at the end and save 10 grand. Okay, but it's going to take you 3 months to do that maybe, and you're going to be then on the market at a different time of the year when maybe prices are different or demand is different. So I think you can't think that way when you're trying to make property your business. Not unless your business is being a building contractor as well as being a property developer. But to the person who's a developer, you need to be thinking about it like a proper business would.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So, what tools, books, or resources helped you early on in your journey?
Well, again, I suppose that that question is probably would get better answers from other people because I am I guess a qualified surveyor, so I'm a trained surveyor, so I understood all the technical aspects already as part of my job. I guess the books that I found probably more useful to me in my early career were more business. So I was always entrepreneurial. I always enjoyed the chase of a deal and the negotiating and the selling aspects, which I had to do a lot of when I had my surveying practice and founded and was growing that as a business. So I guess for me, it was always reading. I was always interested in sort of, I guess, mindset stuff and business books with interested in reading about what made people different, what made you different that you were able to make a success out of something. And I guess that's the bit that I didn't really have from my training. From my training was very technical as a surveyor about how do you manage and how do you maintain and alter and adapt buildings and survey buildings and diagnose problems with buildings, which is all great and it's all really technical. My training for that didn't involve really any business at all, any business stuff. I was naturally entrepreneurial, I guess, just luckily for me, that's how I was, but I didn't have any kind of formal training in that background as to how to go about business. So I guess business related books for me were a real eye opener in terms of then, okay, so how do I put some structure around this entrepreneurial flair that I have? How do I put some sort of order to this and sort of really sort of grow it? Because the other thing that I saw was, well, not everybody has common sense and not everybody has entrepreneurial flair. I kind of just thought, well, everybody must have these things. When you start to realize that not everybody does, I guess then how do I harness that and how do I build the bits that I'm missing? So that's where all the business related stuff came in.
I think that's a brilliant point about reading things that are outside of what you want to do, things that complement the bigger package. Don't get too bogged down in just focusing on the property side of things. Think of it holistically.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, because there'll be all these complementary things that you'll need to do, soft skills particularly as well that you'll need as part of your property development work and part of your property development journey that you need to be, like a big thing is, well, we've done a session this before is negotiating. Like a big thing is negotiation. As a property developer, as a property investor, a big part of what you do will be negotiating good terms on a deal. So there's a whole load of stuff that, I guess a lot of people could do with and would benefit from building up their knowledge on that would just make them sharper in what they're doing, maybe make them get better deals, maybe help them to negotiate better terms, or just be aware of what people are negotiating and can do so that they can think about how can I introduce that on my next deal as a potential way of making this work.
Yeah, exactly. Property development isn't knowing how to build a house, is it?
No, no. You employ people to do that for you. You employ people to design it. You employ the engineer to make it stand up. You employ the builder to build it. You employ all the consultants that give you everything you need to do that house. So you don't need to know how to do that. You need to know how to find the best site where you can build the house on it in the first place and how to get it at the right price.
Yeah, definitely. And I've absolutely loved this chat, but we've got to wrap it up now with one final question. If you could give one tip to somebody on how to get started in property development, what would it be?
Just have the confidence and belief in yourself and get going because you can find the money from somewhere. All you have to do is, and just because you have no track record either, doesn't really matter. Yes, you won't get the best terms to begin with, but if you've got transferable skills, think about how you can give somebody the confidence when you're asking for money, for example. Let's say, for example, you are in IT or something like that, or you're in some sort of a profession that is not property or construction. There'll be things in that profession that you do in your job that would be transferable for you to be able to say, this is how I'm going to structure my project. This is what I'm going to be doing. These are the people that I know I'm going to need to have. Yes, I don't have a project I can show you from before, but I can show you that I understand how it works and I can show you how I'm going to manage it. And then that will give somebody the confidence then to, let's say, if they believe in you as a person, then that'll give them the confidence to back you. So don't think that just because you've got no track record, you won't be able to get started. Start having those conversations, start thinking about how your skills can be used and document how you will approach your job, and that will give somebody the confidence that, because everybody has to start somewhere, everybody has to have a first project. So yeah, that's how to get going. Don't put yourself off by thinking that you haven't done when you shouldn't start.
Absolutely brilliant. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you, find out more about what you do, how can they do that?
Yeah, well, they can find me on my website, Sam. So I've got a website that talks about I do mentoring work with people, property mentoring and business mentoring with companies. They can find out more about me and I guess background and people that I've worked with on my website, which is so you'll see the spelling of my name somewhere on this podcast, on this video. Or on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn as well. So again, Michael McQuade, I'm the Michael McQuade MRICS, which is my qualifications as a surveyor. So you can find me on LinkedIn or on my website.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks a lot for your time, Michael. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Good to speak to you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye.